Alright, let's go. Kill this big guy. Oh man. Good spawn. Good spawn. Conduit. Spinnies. Oops, run away. That's okay, that's okay. Big dude almost hit me. This clan sorcerer is gonna murder me. And the drop. Nice. Nice, nice. Exorcists. Goose. Got our RG. Nice. Wow, look at that time. Oh my goodness. 3 minutes, 9 seconds. New topper. Let's do it. Greetings, wizards. Greetings, programs. Today we're going to get into a Tal Rasha Explosive Blast Greater F speed build. So this is going to be speed build for solo, and I've been timing Greater F 85s at 3 to 5 minutes. So 3 to 5 minute clears for this particular build. It's very fluid. It's a lot of fun, so I hope you like it. We're gonna first go into items, and then we may get into some items and skills, and then we may get into gameplay tips. We're gonna do affixes for the gear, and then we're gonna get into some swaps that you can make if you're willing. Alright, let's get into it. This is a Tal Rasha build, first of all. It's quite a nifty build. Basic idea though is we're channeling Ray of Frost to proc our supermassive black hole that will pull in all the density, and then we'll chew them up, we'll destroy them with our explosive blast casts. Since we have Etch Sigil in this build, Etch Sigil will be randomly attacking with either Black Hole, if they're technically off cooldown in relation to Etch Sigil's timer, or Chain Reaction. Speaking of, Diamond Skin Sleek Shell, rune that gives movement speed, very important for those less dense rifts to be able to move efficiently and reduce the clear time of those rifts. That's why we have Illusionist as well. For movement, we have high cooldown, or sorry, a high cooldown teleport, so it comes off cooldown quite often, as you can see. Very quick teleport, which is quite nice for movement as well. Illusory boots are such a huge boon to this build. They let you move straight through enemies, especially good when you have maps that have maybe loose groupings that aren't completely worth going after and committing to. You can just breeze right through them. You don't have to worry about positioning or anything. Quite a nice item to have in the build. We have Audacity Evocation for the cooldown, Unstable Anomaly for the second life, and then Power of the Storm, of course, for the reduced costs of abilities. Since we're continually casting Explosive Blast, it is quite nice to have that reduced arcane power cost from the Power of the Storm rune on Storm Armor. Huge synergy here with Halo of Carini, though, to give us 80% less damage if Storm Armor is striking an enemy more than 15 yards away. The weapon configuration is the most important here. We are going, you might think it's a glass cannon setup, I don't think it is. We're going Wontolla for the increased multiplier here, additional blasts, of course, from that item. We get Death Wish, so this is a channeling build. You're going to deal most of your damage while channeling. That's why we have the Black Hole to pull everything in, because we can't really move around too much once we've decided to start dealing damage. You're going to want to, sort of post up in areas that have high density or elites to be able to clear the rift efficiently. We also have Etch Sigil, of course, with that extra multiplier for our skills while channeling. Quite nice. Mantle of Channeling gives increased damage and damage reduction while channeling. Again, more synergy there. We're using the Unity for extra damage reduction, double Unity, so you want one on your follower as well. With the follower token, cannot die. This is a solo build, so I recommend the Inspire ability on your follower. The healing abilities are nice as well. This particular setup, the Halo of Carini is quite nice in this build. What Halo of Carini gives you, it's a little bit hard to work around at times, but it gives you the ability to free up this armor slot. So we slot Halo of Carini, that allows us to put the Nemesis bracers on, to wear those. Again, giving us increased progress through spawning more elites when we click the pylons. Quite nice. And then we have the Leoric's Crown and the Cube for increased cooldown. We can get up to 67.9% cooldown in this build. What that allows us to do, having the Leoric's, allows us to drop Gogok of Swiftness and instead slot an extra multiplier. So we're using Bane of the Powerful for that extra 20% and 15% damage increased elites and reduced damage from elites, which is quite nice. When you combine the elite damage in this build from Bane of the Powerful, and you consider the fact that you're going to want to wear the Unity, you have 30% bonus damage to elites in this build. It is quite a nice addition to the build, and it's really fairly well balanced, if I could say so myself. Other multipliers, of course, we're going to be using Bane of the Trapped, which is a required gem. We're also using Gogok for that ramp up of additive damage. It's quite nice. It ramps up to about 60% when you have it a level 100 gem. That will be in the damage increased by skills category, which is quite nice. Bonus to use there, especially since when we are engaging, we're probably going to be near elites, So we will be able to ramp this up. Even if it drops in between the rift, that's okay. We can just re-ramp it up fairly quickly, especially versus the Rift Guardian. This is a nice bonus to have. Now let's see, what other items and skills? Of course, multiplier from Tal Rasha, 3000%. We're not really using the 2-set bonus here. The 4-set will get activated. I think we're only using 3 out of the 4 resistance bonuses, but that's okay for this speed build. By that I mean Black Hole may not be manually cast at all times, which is okay. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's, we're using conventional elements. How could I have forgotten? Huge multiplier here. Of course, it is also a 16-second rotation. 4 out of every 16 seconds will be the fire element. That is where you will deal tremendous damage to enemies. It's sort of a catch-all to, you know, if you hadn't killed the group of elites or group of density that you're planning to kill yet, or sometimes it just randomly hits and you're like Super Saiyan, like just killing everything. It's amazing. It's amazing multiplier here for this particular speed build. So a couple of quick tips on gameplay. Let's get into gameplay. So in this build, you're going to want to keep Explosive Blast and Diamond Skin both on autocast or numlock, whichever you use, and just like that. Beginning of the rift, you're going to want to manually cast. Remember to manually cast your supermassive black hole. That will give you the lightning stack. You cannot get the Tal 6 bonus until you cast that. So I recommend at the very beginning of the rift, just cast black hole. Even if it is into empty space, that is fine. And then as you continue through the rift, you don't necessarily have to manually cast it, but you have the ability to do so if you want. Let me put it that way. This is especially useful around Oculus rings. So solo build, you have, I recommend also you have the Oculus ring on your follower. This will give up to 85% multiplicative if you're standing in the ring or near the ring. On the edge of the ring works as well. You can position easier with this build for Oculus rings. Consider if the Kanai's cube is the edge of an Oculus ring and my enemies are actually standing where I am. I could move into the edge of the Oculus ring and pull them over using either the automatic cast or the manually cast black hole to where my explosive blast would be in range to damage them. Yeah, so other gameplay tips, use your calamity to stun monsters, especially on pylon spawns. After you click a pylon, immediately cast teleport to stun, especially those Lacuni slashers can really insta-proc you with this build, so just keep that in mind. Another thing you can do with the pylons is pre-cast a black hole and then click the pylon. This will hopefully suck in the mobs that spawn, or you can use your auto-casted black hole to use the same purpose. This will keep you from dying. With the Halo of Carini, you do have to take care not to get too close to monsters. If there are no monsters that Storm Armor can electrocute that are far enough away, you will lose this bonus and you will be more vulnerable throughout the rift. So just keep that in mind when you're engaging groups of density, elites, that sort of thing. It's even more sensitive when you're engaging the Rift Guardian. So the Rift Guardian is kind of particular with this build, but it works out fairly well. Having both the Halo of Carini and the Convention of Elements, because you're not going to deal your max damage until that fire phase. You can, if you need to survive on the Rift Guardian, just pour it out and continue channeling your Ray of Frost on the Rift Guardian to keep up your take-up bonus. While you wait for the cold phase to come around on Convention of Elements. Once that cold phase comes around, you can use your Teleport Calamity to get closer to the Rift Guardian, and then you will deal that massive damage when the fire phase is in effect. Alright, let's move on to affixes. So we're going to get into affixes. Cooldown, of course, 67%. You're going to want cooldown from Paragon. You want the diamond in the helmet, shoulders, gloves, both rings, weapon, and I prefer the source. I'm going to make this optional to have cooldown on the source. You can instead put explosive blast % damage here in that slot instead of cooldown, but I prefer the cooldown. It really helps out having that higher cooldown to reduce your teleport. It means you can teleport more often through the rift. It keeps up your diamond skin, sleek shell, movement speed. The uptime on this is higher. Quite nice to have higher cooldown in this build. So that's why I prefer the cooldown here, but it is an option to put that there. Of course, explosive blast damage is going to be required for chest piece and shoulders. Let's see. Fire damage, you're going to want fire damage on your bracers and on your amulet. My amulet here is not properly rolled. I have int crit crit. It should be fire % crit crit. That would be a perfect rolled amulet. I tried to make the best of it though by augmenting this ancient, and hopefully gave you a good test bench there. We have crit and crit hit damage. You're going to want to crit on your source, both rings, crit hit damage on your second ring, of course with the conventional elements. You're going to want to crit on your bracer, crit hit damage on your gloves, crit on your helmet, and crit hit damage on your amulet, of course. You can roll, something really cool here is you can roll % damage, int, and cooldown on your weapon. Very high damage setup, so keep that in mind. You're going to want to, as I mentioned earlier, wear the Unity for perfect setup, but getting a cooldown Unity can be quite hard, so if you have to wear Hail of Karenni, just make sure it's a one with a high legendary effect. I'd say 75% or higher would be desirable, and then of course crit with cooldown would be the rolls you would want on your Hail of Karenni as opposed to the Unity. Let's see, defensive affixes, you just want vitality was quite important to have. I found having higher than 700k health kept me alive a lot more with this build, so keeping that vitality roll on your shoulders is quite nice to have. Either armor or elite % reduction on your chest piece can be very nice to have. Getting this item can be quite hard because the chest piece rolls with attack speed by default, but you should be able to find one eventually. Armor on the pants with vitality. Boots should be int fight, all resist, and armor. Mine are imperfectly rolled. And then of course vitality on the helmet. Vite, gems, and pants, so amethyst and pants is an option if you're looking to hit that 700k threshold. I highly recommend it. Arcane power and crit, very vital to recovery here. So along with the storm armor, power of the storm, we have arcane power and crit, keeps our resource up. As far as secondaries are concerned, you're going to want crowd control resistance, reduces the duration of crowd control impairing effects, at least 2 pieces of gear. Doesn't matter what the roll is, just have them on 2 pieces. That will reduce effects such as Nightmare, Frozen when you get hit. Quite nice to have, let you get through the rift quicker. Also, look for gold and globe bonus radius, so pickup radius on gear. I recommend at least 6 extra yards to your pickup radius. Makes it a lot smoother to scoop up those orbs without issue. And of course more is better, but 6 would be my base recommendation. And there you have it. I think that's a general overview of affixes, so let's move on. So one of the simplest things you can do for swaps, if you want to just, and this would be if you're farming just a few greater rifts lower, you know, you want to farm 83s instead of 85s, or you want to farm 80s instead of 85s, you could pop in a Gogok of Swiftness. This would go in place of your Bane of the Powerful, so you lose the multiplier and the elite damage reduction, but you gain an extra 15% cooldown. This would increase your cooldown even further, make it so that your movement abilities are up that much more, speed through the rift even quicker. You know, you should be able to kill enemies a lot quicker at those lower GR levels, and be able to really take advantage of that extra cooldown. It will also reduce the cooldown on your explosive blast, which is a nice benefit as well. You get higher rate of machine gun fire on that chain reaction, which is quite nice. I wouldn't recommend this swap. This particular configuration was not the highest if you're trying to push the highest greater while you're doing your speeds, but it is a very good configuration as well. Then of course the next stage is you could swap out the Leox Crown to take advantage of a different type of damage debuff. There are Strongarm bracers in the cube. You can pop those in. Really simple swap. Of course we're using Black Hole in this build, so anything hit by Black Hole will have that 30% debuff. And then you would of course use, instead of Bane of the Powerful, you would use Gogok for the extra cooldown that way. And I found that to be a very good setup as well. It falls short though because of the consistency of both Gogok and Strongarms. The fact that you have to proc Black Hole to deal that increased damage, the fact that you have to keep up the Gogok of Swiftness buff means they're more volatile than running Powerful and Leoryx. And even if they're a higher bonus or a higher benefit there, they weren't as consistent throughout the Rift, which meant they were a little bit worse. But that's still a very good configuration to try out. Other configuration you could try is actually using Focus and Restraint. So we would take advantage of an 125% multiplier here, where we're using this ring set. We're just going to use the same gems. We're going to use Gogok and Gogok of Swiftness with this configuration, because we won't be able to use Leoryx in the cube. Instead of Leoryx, we will be putting the Aquila Cuirass. The fact that you can't slot the Unity, we have to have some way to make that up. So you could put the Aquila in the cube and slot a little bit more resource management on gear to manage the Aquila. So we would basically rework our Paragon to have max arcane power. That's my preference. You don't have to do it, but I find it helps with keeping the Aquila up for that. And then keep on hand some resource related items. So instead of explosive blast damage, you could roll with resource, and instead of percent damage or intellect, you could roll with resource on your weapon, and you would equip both of these items to get higher resource RCR on gear. That would manage the resource for Aquila and keep this bonus up most of the time. You have to be a little bit more careful with this configuration to not tap your Black Hole manually too much. Keep that in mind. Something simple, if you don't have these RCR items easily available, is you could even, there's enough cooldown in the build to actually just drop the cooldown gem from your helmet, the diamond in the helmet. Just drop it out, replace it with a topaz. If you don't have those resource cost reduction rolls on gear, that's another option you could do. Is you could just keep your same gear that has percent damage and explosive blast damage on it, but roll with a helmet, a topaz in the helmet. The other swap we have to make with this config is drop diamond skin and pick up that signature. I recommend a lightning signature just because it's easier to keep up your Tau 4 and Tau 6 bonuses with the lightning signature as opposed to any other element. So one swap you could make with this configuration is switching the rune on Black Hole from the lightning rune, which gives that increased radius, to spell steal, which would give you extra damage for temporarily 4 or 5 seconds, depending on how much density your Black Hole pulls in. It's quite nice. You can get, 30% plus damage boosts, so it's really good for bursting down elites. If you're in a party, another rune that's really good is Event Horizon. If you're able to suck up frozen, poison, the molten explosions, you can be very helpful. And this was also a very high performing configuration. This is what I would recommend for groups. If you want to go into a group setup with this build, it is a little less defensive, the downsides, a little less defensive because we don't have the diamond skin. That shielding that comes up every so often is not going to be there anymore. And also the run speed from the Sleek Shell rune is dropped, so you will move a little bit slower in this configuration. That's just something to keep in mind, but I found it to be very smooth, and it's also a very good configuration to try out. The other option that you could run in a group setting is to actually use the Stone of Jordan. So instead of Unity, you would select Stone of Jordan, and you would put the Aquila on with all the swaps, Aquila in the cube, and then the resource swaps I mentioned earlier, you would make those in some fashion form. I want to thank you for tuning in and watching this guide on the Explosive Blast speed build for Season 13. Coming into Season 13, this build is not quite as high pushing as, say, a Meteor speed build or a Veer's speed build even, but it is very fast. It's a lot of fun. It's a ton of fun. The pull with the grind, it's just amazing. I love this build. Hope you like it too, and catch you in the rifts, wizards, adventurers, and programs. Thank you for